Hey guys, today is the 25th day. It means we're on the last day of the fifth week. That means we are in Matthew chapter 25. And if you remember yesterday, we ended chapter 24 with a parable, right? The parable of the faithful and wise servants and then the servants who are not, right? So you kind of have these two. So we're coming off a parable, and then 25 starts with two parables and then once again kind of concludes with a wrap up of those parables. The first one is the parable of the 10 virgins. I know there's a lot to be said about this, and there's a lot of beliefs and things about this, but for the easy part of this is it doesn't really matter that they're virgins. The point of it is that there's 10, right? And the reason there's 10 is because in the Talmud, which is the Jewish law writing, it tells us that when there's a Jewish wedding, there has to be 10 lamps. There's a few things that have to be there for it to be a truly God-honoring Jewish wedding. One of those is 10 lamps. If you go today to a Jewish wedding, there's still 10 lamps or 10 candles that are burning somewhere in that ceremony. And so there's 10 lamps. Each lamp would have been like a hand little lamp, would have been very small, kind of, that would have just lit the way, right? So think of like a procession where five girls would have been on each side, and the bride would have walked through them. And so it says that the kingdom of heaven, right? Heaven, the kingdom of God. God is like these 10 virgins. And so it goes on, it says 5 of them, they all had lamps, right? But 5 of them took oil, and 5 of them did not. Notice it says flask of oil in the ESV. And that's very interesting in that it's not that they didn't fill their lamps up. They would have filled their lamps up, but they also took a reserve, something more, because they would have prepared, because they didn't know how long the bridegroom would have been, right? And so not only did they just put oil in their lamp, but they took a little reserve, a little flask, a little container of extra oil in case if something went wrong. And that's the whole point of this story. And so it says they took of them, in verse 5, it says, notice it says they all became drowsy and slept. The bridegroom took longer than was needed, and they all fell asleep. And them falling asleep is not the problem. They all fell asleep. The problem is 5 of them already had arrangements for the length, the longevity of the bridegroom, right? They brought the extra flask. The other 5 did not. And so they're all sleeping, and it says in the midnight there was a cry, here comes the bride, right? Here comes the bride. And they all come out to meet them. They rose up. They get their lamps ready. It says they trim their lamps, which means they got them in order, which means 5 on one side, 5 on the other. So the bridegroom would walk through them. And what happens? 5 of them don't have enough oil. That oil they used, and they waited on the bridegroom and waited and eventually fell asleep. It would have burnt out. They did not have that extra reserve. They did not plan accordingly for the length of the bridegroom, right? They just said, okay, we'll do it. And that's just what they did, and they ran out. And so the 5 who ran out, they did what everybody would do. Hey, give me some of your oil, give me some of your oil. And they said, no, we planned for this. You go to the store and get your own. And so while they went to the store to get their own, it says what? The door was shut. They were not allowed into the wedding. And so this is important. And the Jews, hearing this, reading Matthew 25, this would have been something very traumatic, because like I said, in the Talmud, it says that it takes 10 lamps to make a Jewish wedding. So this would have been like they would have postponed the wedding until these 5 ladies came back with more oil. That's what a normal Jew would do. Here, this is Jesus saying, I'm not postponing for anything. When I come back, you got to be ready, right? You've got to be willing to be ready. I'm not stopping for anybody. I'm doing what I would do. And it ends with, watch therefore, you know neither the day nor the hour, right? Jesus isn't stopping for anyone. Then we go on to the parable of the talents, right? says that a servant's going on and he gives 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1. A talent is a measurement of 6,000 denarii. A denarii was a common person's day wage. So if you say today, about $9 an hour, let's say that's $75 a day. So a talent is worth about $450,000 in today's, right? Just one. So he gave one guy 1 talent, 450 grand. He gave a guy double that, which is 900 grand. And he gave the guy with 5 talents, that's $2.2 million, right? So the servants were given large portions of money. And they were supposed to keep after this, right? And you read through the story, the one who has 5, he doubles it. The one who has 2, he doubles it. The one who has 1, $450,000, he just buries it. He says, I'm not going to work for my master. My master doesn't need me, doesn't need me to work. He's got plenty of money. I'm just going to bury it. So when he comes back, I have it, right? I didn't lose it. I didn't waste it. I didn't double it. I just have it. And so we read the story, what happens? The one that 5 and doubles it, well, good and faithful servant. The one who has 2 doubles it, well, good, done and faithful servant, right? And then we get to the one who just buries it. And if you notice in verse 25, it's very interesting when you read this. It says here, you have what is yours. It's like the servant didn't realize what he was doing, right? He was saying here, I didn't lose it. Here you go. But the master, what he says, you wicked and slothful servant, you wicked and lazy servant. The master didn't care about the amount, right? 1 doubled it to 5, 1 doubled it to 2. The amount of what happened didn't matter, because even the master says to the servant with 1, he says you could at least taken it to a bank and got interest. You could have just done something with it, but instead you didn't do anything with it. You didn't use your resources, right? You didn't do that. And so you didn't help me out, right? And he says, cast him out to the outer of darkness. The whole point of this parable, much like the 10 virgins, just like the good and bad servant in 24, the whole point is to be ready for Jesus to come back. But what Jesus is teaching here is our readiness for Jesus is how we use our resources. God has given us resources to use, and how do you use them? And we see that in the final judgment, the end of chapter 25, and it says that the Son of Man is going to come in his glory. It's talking about a future event known in Revelations 20 as the Great White Throne Judgment, and there's going to be a separation of sheep and goats, one on the left, one on the right, right? And so there's going to be this separation. And the sheep are separated by, it says that I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. That was the separation by what they did. And it's not totally what they did, but it's by what they did proved what they believed for their master. And so the whole point of this is, how do you use resources? It's really easy to say, oh, I love Jesus and I can't wait till he comes back. But if you say, hey, I love my master and I can't wait till he comes back, but you don't extend his kingdom, you don't extend his resources, do you really love him? And that's the whole point of all these parables. It's the whole point of chapter 24 and chapter 25. If you say you love God, then you should work for him. The actions of our body speaks the belief in our heart. If you believe that God is the ultimate master of everything, then you should expand his kingdom. You should read his word. You should evangelize to others. You should do good works in his name, right? And so it shows what you do. And so that wicked servant in the second parable of chapter 25, it's not that he just buried it. It's that he didn't do anything for the master. He just said, hey, master, you're good enough, right? You reap where you sow. You do all these things. And basically he says, you don't need me. And God is saying, I do need you. He needs every one of us to share his gospel. And so that's the whole point of chapter 25. And we will see you next week, starting with 26, as we're getting into the to the best part, right? The crucifixion and the resurrection. We got 3 more days together. You guys can do it. Hang in there. We'll see you on Monday on chapter 26. God bless.